Hi everyone, and I realize there's been some slight slip-ups this week, and it does result from this shift from the 14-week to the 12-week, and it's a pretty new course anyway, so I apologize for those, and uh, um, I'll just correct them as we go. And there's only three of us, so we can be relaxed about it, I hope. Um, so I have been really enjoying the discussion boards and everything, and I just wanted to say that this course has a certain premise to it, which you may or may not agree with. That doesn't mean if you disagree with the premise, then it doesn't mean the course is worthless. It just will be a different kind of experience, really. But the premise is that, and this premise is sort of based on my experience, basically. The premise is that we do have a worldview that is very, very, very difficult to see the world other than how we've learned to see it. And much of how we see the world, if not perhaps most, in an everyday sense, is is rather culturally conditioned. That is controversial because we do sort of tend to believe that science reveals re- reality, right? That it is something that is gives us a real sort of tangible sort of sense of what the world is, the physical world, for example. Um, and so so to say, well, that our perspective might be culturally controlled, from hundreds of years of cultural beliefs and conditioning, is sort of controversial. And I don't mean to say, I suppose, that reality is completely relative. And uh, one of the big academic criticisms of people is to say to them, oh, you're just a relativist. Well, I mean, that would be close to being true for me, but it isn't totally true. My contention would be that I simply don't know reality, at least in that tangible sense that we're talking about. So, so, and and the first 4 weeks of this course, if not a little longer, are really trying to take a look at what our worldview might be, where it might have come from, how we might have come to hold a particular view of reality. And in my opinion, if we can't really take a look at how we look, then we can't do anything. It's very hard to go any further then with this question of science and religion, because we have to get past how we've learned to look to get anywhere. This is just my perspective, and I could be wrong, right? So, but uh, my experience tells me that I'm actually probably not wrong, but I don't know if I put my finger on the right answer on. And what I really don't know how to do is to surface that worldview, to make it visible to us, so that we can say, oh, I'm seeing things through this particular pair of glasses. And so the first 4 weeks of this course was my own, represents a sort of a parallel with my own attempts to try and surface things for myself. And so it's like, well, first of all, I have to admit that I have a worldview. I mean, can I become aware of any aspects of it? And second of all is say that I do have this worldview, and say that it is deeply influenced by my culture. Then can I study my own culture to surface that worldview, to see where a particular sort of, and in this case, I'm really interested in things that affect our perspective on what's real. Um, can we? And so science is obviously central to that in our culture. Um, but are other perspectives on what's real possible? Yes, they are. But 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 with the programming inside of us that is operating, it's very difficult to sort of get there, to that. We might pay intellectual lip service to another possibility, but to actually taste it, or really get that reality could be wholly other than we perceive it to be. So, and that's not to say it could be anything, or that it's all up for grabs. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying that in our Western culture, we have it's my sort of back to the premise of the course. So in our Western culture, we have evolved a view that sees the world a particular way. It's deeply ingrained in us, and to put science and spirituality back together, to put Humpty Dumpty back together, we need to take a look at how we look, and so that's what we've been doing, and discussions. You guys are leaping ahead in a discussion because I wanted us to get to some of these things slowly, and we've gotten to them very quickly. We're next week going to be starting out with the Greeks, ancient Greek and Greek philosophers, and mostly Plato and Aristotle, and there's a long way to go to get to, say, Immanuel Kant, that some of the discussion has revolved around. But it's like, actually in some very interesting ways, our entire dilemma in the modern world was contained right there in ancient Greece, in all of the philosophies that we have from ancient Greece. Plato, Aristotle became key throughout the Middle Ages, even into the scientific revolution, and they're still with us. They're still with us today. So I just find it fascinating to go back to that area, and then to try and run it forward, and see what happened with these things that they were noodling with back then, which are the same things essentially, but with this caveat that I believe that the Greeks were more connected than we are. So in other words, it was the dawn of the rational thought, what we call rational thought, and so they were still plugged into another kind of sensibility, and so that makes things very interesting, particularly with respect to Plato for me. Plato comes into the topic of the noumena and the phenomena because Plato thought that there were these forms, like the good, the true, and the beautiful, but everything had forms, but there were higher forms and he called them the good, the true, and the beautiful. The highest form being the good, and that one could become, through the process of philosophy, which, remember that philosophy meant the love of wisdom, and in that time philosophy could go beyond logic or what we now call rationality into intuitive perception of things. So these higher forms could be intuitively perceived. In other words, there was a way of knowing that was beyond the senses, right? There was a philosophical, one could arrive at a way of knowing that was beyond the senses through the process of philosophy, which in a way was like a spiritual practice. So, and that would be true in the last course that we all just went through, or most of us, that in religions it's the same kind of thing, that there's the possibility of in the world's religions of the experience of something from beyond the senses, right? God, for example. So the noumena and the phenomena. So Plato really had he set a lot of store by what had been, quotes, revealed to him, what he had seen of the noumena. Right? Now today, in academic departments, philosophy departments, and whatnot, people laugh at Plato. I mean, he's not taken these things are not taken that seriously, and I'd like to suggest that's because of our worldview, right? And it's like, do we know that we couldn't have a knowing, a connection, a deep contact with something beyond our senses? Do we actually know that that's not possible? And the answer is no, we don't. Um, and, and this course is going to perhaps point at some things further on that suggest that even science would begin to start to say that there might be some kind of possibility. Because there's a particular perspective on who and what we are that we live with, and we've got to jump out of that perspective, in my view. At least try it, to jump out of this perspective. And that's going to get delineated more as we go through the course. So I don't think that we can leap into a discussion of science and religion, or science and spirituality, without going through this process. I think it's a pointless thing, because we're locked into our modes of seeing, which force us into looking at the entire problem in a particular way. And the way we look at the problem makes the problem sort of intractable. I mean, we can come up with logical solutions like non-overlapping magistera and things like that, but these are kind of intellectual justifications. They're not really putting the world back together again. And so I don't see any other way to do it, and so this is what I've tried to do in this course. And we'll see how it goes with you guys. So it's and I've tried to add this experience component to it. So it's like, can we even like sort of get a glimpse by trying what Einstein would have called thought experiments? Can we try thought experiments, and really these hikes that I tell you to go on, like thought experiments? Can we really experience our worldview, and can, through the imagination, can we step out of our worldview, even to get a slight taste, or something like that, of another perspective, another view? We are looking through a pair of spectacles to see the spectacles. We are still looking through the spectacles. Without actually taking them off or lifting them for a second, we're always looking through the spectacles. And my experience of this debate of science and spirituality, even with people who aren't scientists, is that I am talking with a pair of spectacles most of the time. It's like, we've got to get beyond that. We've got to question and become aware of some aspect of that, of the spectacles that we're wearing. And then that enables us to be open to an entirely other possible view and experience of the world, which is very needed today. So that's what it's about. And now you may disagree with all of this entire premise, but there's still going to be, the course is still going to be interesting, because we're going to go through everything, right? How does science progress? Quantum physics, relativity, the new science, our scientific creation story. We're going to go through all of these things, though. How does it compare to mysticism? What's the mystical experience compared to the scientific perspective? We're going to go through this whole journey, and so it's still going to be interesting. But like I said, there's a philosophical basis under the course that kind of helps explain its construction, and we'll see if it's effective. I just think it's a very difficult and challenging thing to do, and I wish that I knew how to do it better, but I don't. But hopefully I'm learning, and so we'll see as we go.